Well, welcome everyone. I can see that we have actually great attendance as always. Canvas Summer Academy, and this is the second session this year. I want to welcome everybody from all sorts of meridians, the places where you're coming from. Here in Belgrade, it is 3 p.m. So for us, it's a perfect time. So hopefully you guys did not actually wake up too early, or it's not too late. But nevertheless, today's topic, it's actually one of the topics that our team has been extensively thinking about and something that we've been facing so much over the last few years. Whenever we go and whenever we do our work with our fellow partners in different parts of the world, we always do actually get to the common issues, like, facing the objectives, facing the issues, talking about the tactics and the strategies. But more and more we are talking about transition. More and more we are talking about transition towards democracy. We are talking about different kind of institutions. We are talking about what really happens when people do get, when people do try to get into the issues of whether their change was successful entirely, partially, or what kind of consequences in a foreseeable future after the political change influenced by the social movement have happened. So, typically what really happens once we see the change and what's dynamic behind that. So transition is just about the start. Are we going to be able to protect our victory in a sustainable way to turn into democracy, or are we able to input and permanently protect the values that social movements actually embedded in our society after successful application of its tactics or strategies? Or we need to actually face on some other things like protecting, achievements that we have done. Like, what really happens once we live through that bear effect? For those with the cheaper tickets, bear effect in a Canvas terminology would be the reason for unifying your allies because of the external threat, like facing external enemy and seeing huge threat actually just both naturally, physiologically, ideologically, it just connects people to start working together. But what kind of threats, happen? What are the challenges once we actually get rid out of that, or we get out of that immediate threat once we are done with our imminent opponent? What is the difference, and what does it take to gain and achieve your long-term goals against the short-term or mid-term goals? How is that grand strategic goal, the plan that we have built for a long-term transition, for a long-term change, how is that affected by different players, meaning the institutions, both movements, both different kind of organizations within the transitional period of time? Now, I could just say that in our terminology, we just call it now what? What are we all about? What really happened? So with all of that, Canvas, has been trying, and I think not only Canvas, but I think wider community of the organizations which are dealing with SNVC, the people who are in this field, people who are working with civil society, how can we get deeper answers? Like, what's real methodology? What's the understanding of common questions which are rising after the immediate change? And then what can we do about it? And we said, okay, probably it's time for us to go on quest and try to answer those. And I have to tell all of you, respected fellows and partners and the audience, it's been for a long time challenge of our organization. And a year ago, we have actually decided to go on that quest and to try to initiate something that we initially called research on a transition. I have to say it was very, very their move of my team and the people involved in that. And here I have actually great people today with whom I'm going to discuss that. First of all, my dear colleague, Isabella Cuomo. Isabella is Executive Director of Canvas US office. And Isabella has been the lead researcher on this topic, Isabella will correct me, but I think we have been dealing with that for over a year and a half, right? It's been extensive academic research, reading, interviewing, checking all different data, trying to learn from our own experiences and trying to comprise all of that into one substantial report that you guys, I'm sure, are going to be able to read more further down the road. I'm not sure what's going to come out of this, as Canvas has been doing academic work for over now 16, 17 years. We've been teaching in different universities, even much longer than that, around 20 years, of trainings and everything we have been doing with different movements. But this research is giving us not even some answers, but some new questions which are rising. And I don't think it's going to stop in the foreseeable future. Maybe it's going to open up some other interesting academic discussions. And, hopefully this is a good start. Hopefully this is a very good start, and I think we can start from here. So the second person, which is not the least of the importance for us, it's over here, it's the Ahmed Sami Farid. Ahmed is a good friend, very well-known activist from Egypt. With Ahmed, we're going to talk about the Egyptian situation, and then last but not least, it's AC. AC, it's Myanmar activist. Hopefully you guys will understand that we want to protect her privacy for various reasons, and we're going to try to do as we, it's our role to help each other, and this is the way of the contribution of the CSA. Canvas Summer Academy is doing it in a way that we just want to, help the people in various ways, not only through this discussion, but actually stimulate them to be present in public in a shape that actually is comfortable for them. So without further ado, I would kick off with this, with Isabella. Hi, Bella, and hopefully you're just going to get us into this very, very interested and energetic topic. So let's go and hear from you. What are the main issues you found with research? Tell us how you feel about it right now when learn much more about it, and are we closer to some of the main answers that everybody would like to hear? So up to you.
Thank you so much, Slobo, and hi, everyone. Really grateful to be here and to be speaking with you all and sharing some of the findings and some of those new questions that Slobo was speaking to as it relates to the transition. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. I just have a couple of slides to show you all. Slobo, would you mind?
Stop sharing your screen.
Yeah, stop sharing. Perfect.
Thank you.
So as Slobo mentioned, our real question here with studying past transitions and trying to find answers to how we can better manage them is the now what. And so today I'm going to talk about some of the really top line findings from our research and some of the answers that we've come up with, and we're finding some success with activists that are seeking to develop a strategy for the transition. Before I jump into the findings and the answers we've kind of resourced, I want to highlight that you're going to see in these slides that we're referring to national level transitions, right? We're talking about a country level transition. However, I want to emphasize that from Canvas's perspective, planning for a transition and having a strategy is applicable to any movement and any cause. So whether you're a student fighting for a change at your university or you're combating against climate change, transition is important to keep in mind and to develop a strategy for. We see it as the follow-through action, if you will. So the question that we led with our research, and as Slobo said about 1.5 years ago, was how can movements better ensure the achievements of their revolution or campaign become reality during the transition? We pulled together some practical knowledge over a course of the year, and we went through and we reviewed all of the academic literature we could find, as well as resources and research that our fellow civil society organizations have produced. We studied various case studies, we conducted a lot of stakeholder interviews, and we drew upon our own experience in transitions that we've been a part of and how we're able to kind of make a better path forward. Some of the areas that we were really looking at, right, we weren't just focusing on a people power revolution and the transition thereafter. we wanted to look at a variety of transitions and make sure that we were learning lessons from everywhere we could. That means we were looking at not only post-revolution, but also top-down transitions, maybe from a monarchy or from a military dictator, as well as post-violence transitions. We observed them and pulled lessons both from the literature as well as stakeholder interviews. To give you a sense of the breadth of work that we did in this research, we went through and we examined 25 transition case studies. Stakeholders that we spoke to are sourced from over 15 countries. And what we found were a couple of really key pitfalls in the transition, things that we found that activists have been struggling with. A key piece of the findings was that activists are continuing to rely on resistance during the transition, using and falling back on the tactics that were used to achieve revolution. These are the key tactics that we're seeing are being used in the transition. However, those tactics are threatening political deadlocks as well as economic collapse. One of the key countries that we saw this take place was in Nepal in 2008. There was so much resistance against any of the changes that were taking place in the transition, and particularly the slow pace of the change, right? The population was really expecting an overnight change and hoping that that energy from the revolution would continue. And when it started to slow down, there was a lot of frustration that just boiled over into never-ending street protests. We've also found that succeeding governments are failing to implement meaningful changes and the demands of the revolution. So there's this feeling when revolution occurs that there is victory and that the old system is gone. However, the old system remains in place, right? The rules of the game might not be entirely clear, but we still have the same infrastructure. And a lot of the times we're going to have the same politicians and dictators that are carrying over into the transition period. A key example of this is from Zimbabwe as well as from Lebanon. The challenge is that there is little incentive or reason for those succeeding governments to implement those changes, particularly if it threatens an individual's power or their position. And finally, I'm very certain this won't come as a surprise to any of you, a very obvious finding, if you will. We found in our research that authoritarian actors, and if I may, namely China and Russia, are actively attempting to derail transitions, particularly if they come out of a people power revolution. And they're supporting rogue militaries as well as other violent actors as a means to destabilize that particular country. We're finding that that is in an effort to either gain geopolitical power or perhaps out of fear of an own people power revolution taking place in their own country, right? Kind of that inspiration that we saw in the Arab Spring in 2011. Any way to thwart that energy, we're finding that authoritarian actors are going out of their way to do so. Again, won't come as a surprise, and we're very lucky today to have other panelists that are going to speak, I think, to this topic in particular that have intimate knowledge of it. But today and now, we're finding that this is particularly important in both Myanmar and Sudan. We're finding that Russia in particular is actively engaging individual hardliners and embellishing them as a means to destabilize the transition and to seize power, either through a coup or through instigating more violence. So we've taken these findings, right, and these kind of gaps or needs from activists during the transition, and we've compiled a curriculum of 7 training modules. And I'd love to highlight some of the really key lessons that are a part of those training modules, right? The first one is that need for activists to shift their strategy during the transition. So it means that instead of focusing on resistance, there is a need for movements to create a strategy that is based on reform, right? Looking to adjust the current institutions and the current structures so that, as Slobo mentioned, we can start that long-term process of democratization. It's not going to happen just in the transition period, but our goal here is to set a foundation so that we can continue to build on it. We also find that in relation to those succeeding governments, it's incredibly important that activists and movements are formally part of the transition processes. That means that they're participating at local, regional, and national levels during the transition. To put it in more basic terms, this means that activists should be a part of that transitional government all the way down to a local council in order to make sure that the demands of the revolution are actually being implemented through reform. Part of this also means that activists continue to break out and to join civil society organizations so that they're able to lead really strong monitoring and accountability mechanisms, including over those that have joined those local, regional, and national processes in the transition. And finally, a really kind of key part of this transitional curriculum and that support that's needed for activists in order to navigate the transition and achieve their demands is to build new skills while also leveraging the old ones, right? So we don't want to throw out our tactics of resistance altogether. Instead, we want to look to have some early training on new skills that are needed in order to implement reform. That looks like negotiations, understanding how to reform a policy or how to remove martial law. It also means learning how to pursue transitional justice against criminal leaders that committed human rights abuses or war crimes. At the same time, we're not going to be able to stop every single actor from pursuing a destabilization against the transition. So that means that we need to maintain our tactics of resistance and to leverage them when there's threatening behavior against the transition and when someone is attempting to cause backsliding. I'm going to pass over to Slobo now. Thank you all so much for hearing about our research and our findings.
Thanks, Bella. I mean, this is fascinating. Just quick question before we move to AC and Ahmed. Like, I mean, how much do you think these trainings organized for the post-change societies throughout transition? What do you think, like, what's the possibility for the recruitment among the from the social movements of the audience needed for those further tactics once you achieve the victory and the energy it's going from the highest points, to like really ideological thinking, now we have done it, but actually the work is about to start. I mean, we who lived through that, we know it, but I'm not sure it's so familiar for us. So what's the potential for these movements to keep on high number of activists being recruited and active? Like, are these trainings going to be able to address that? I mean, any ideas, any responses yet?
Yeah, absolutely, Slobo. Thank you for the question. This is a really key part of the transition strategy, right? It's important for the movement to continue to pull supporters. And in fact, whereas we see during the revolution that the movement is focusing on pulling those that are in support of its demands, once we get into the transition period, we're dealing with not just our own goals, but we're dealing with the goals of our entire country, right? Or our entire context. And that means that there's a big diversity in opinions. And we have to expand our strategy and the way that we're framing the issues so that we can pull in more and more supporters. At the same time, in order to lead those institutional reforms, there's so much opportunity to bring in subject matter experts that are able to support, including those that might be in exile, as well as international subject matter experts and those regionally that can support with, say, educational reform or pursuing criminal justice against war criminals.
So thank you for that. With that said, Ahmed, let me just ask you before before you tell us a bit about your own experiences and like findings from these research, from what just Bella said. Like,
yes.
How many common, specific items that you identified were bothering you throughout your transition in the period of Egypt after the change?
I think all of them are very accurate. Most of this point is what we already been facing in 2000, and but the only disagreement between what Isabella said and what my experience is she is directing activists toward to be more involved and go filling the whole political gap after a revolution, which is take us to the path Egyptians choose in that time, which is election. And elections was not the best choice, in my opinion. My opinion is that after all these changes, the whole community, the whole society, including the people who just get rid of them, we must sit down and rewrite our social contract. We must sit down and rewrite a constitution. We must sit down and rewrite the rule of the games, the new games. And then the activists from the streets, from the groups, from the social movements, from the syndicates, from the civil society, even from the political parties, have a bigger opportunity to set up the goal where all of us from the different backgrounds, different interests is going, and where exactly we should stop our political ambitious or political agendas and to start to think about everybody, the country, the nation, the society. And this is the only different slide between the end of the methodology. Everything I totally agree with, except that we should go to fill the gap. The main problem in Egypt that we've been pushed by a secret ally between the military and the Islamists toward elections, because the military knew very well.
Do you feel, and that was my intro question into letting you actually go and give us the more insights, like, do you have a feeling that in Egypt, and especially throughout the Arab springtime, that victory has been stolen from you, that it's been actually stolen, or you think it deviated because of what Bella just said, that the old forces, the old people in place actually try to derail the general society from a transition into sliding back what suits them better? So just that two parallels and how you feel about it, and then I'll give you a floor.
I'm not that kind of people seeing things white and black. There is plenty of other colors. It's not stolen or not stolen. I mean, stolen, no, because the game is still open and the players everybody's, some of them in jail, of course, some of them is in exile, but the whole game is still there. But there was very different aspect in the Egyptian society, which is the Islamist. And the Islamists, they know very well how to working underground secretly, and in the same time formulating social connections all the time. We don't. We think political agendas, narrative is the most significant. We need also to learn from that. We need to have a huge civil society base everywhere in order to mobilize this toward a very open constitution, and then a very clear and fair and clear election. the situation in Egypt is quite, historically, is quite a little bit funny, because there were an indirect allies between the military and the Islamists. A short time ally, because later on the military made a huge coup d'etat against the Islamists, and since then the general is ruling the country. Basically, what I learned from the experience in the last 12 years, that the hardest is to be construction activist. The easiest is to be demolishing activist. You can build a building in 10 years, but you can demolish the same building in 6 months, because demolishing is much easier than building. From the same things goes with politics, the same things goes with social movements. And basically, if you wanted to make changes, political changes, huge changes, revolutions in your country, you need to be armed with knowledge. And here I'm not talking about average knowledge, which is how to mobilize people, how to campaign, how to create your own message. That's very essential, but not enough. Not enough to carry on, not enough to continue. We need to have enough ideology, have enough knowledge about how the military works. You need to have a good knowledge about public policy. You need to have good knowledge about how the administration system in your country is working. You need to have enough knowledge how to formulate a law. You need to you need to sit down quietly and watch carefully how the daily work in any governmental organization is happening. Not coming from the street and start to guiding the people, this is right and this is wrong. Although this is your intentions, your methodology, your ideology can be more modern than what you have already. But in order to modernize these institutions or these organizations or this sometimes companies, you need to see how it's work already, to understand how it's work already, and then trying to modernize the system in order not to demolish everything, but reconstructing in everything. Although there is two things you need to make sure all the time it's not touchable. The first is the free of media. Always free media is very important to convey your messages. Second, you need to make sure that there is a free space for civil society to formulate, to register, and to move freely, and to receiving international funding. And political groups also need to have the right to be active all the time, and need to have access to resources, especially financial resources. So donation for political parties or political campaigns should be allowed. So I cannot see all this from the eyes or the glasses of a member in the parliament who's trying to implement a specific political agenda. I see this as a basic settlement for the near future. I'm seeing this an embedded parallels inside the constitution. The society, you are in power or in jail, is what mechanism should be working like this. Otherwise, you are maybe gaining your own political agenda, but not gaining a much better environment for everybody to enjoy being a citizen of this country.
Thank you, Ahmed. I'll definitely have some more questions for you, but before we do that, let me go to AC. AC, hi. I hope that you hear us. Okay, great. Good to have you. So could you just give us a bit the brief idea on Myanmar, like fascinating transition, everybody were thrilled to see that suddenly the country is going towards the change. We see these kind of, like pillars of the force being eager to let more space, political space for the opposition. Everybody felt like now this could be the textbook case that's actually everybody are going to be following, or it was at sort of, doing something. And then suddenly we have a huge change. And again, something that was the predominantly topic last year, the coup d'etat from last Canvas Summer Academy. So tell us a bit your overview. And before you do that, so for all the other participants, please, Q&A is open. So any kind of questions, whatever I see, I'll actually try to reiterate to our guests after the AC gives us a bit of her overview. And then, anything else, my colleague Anna is there, she's going to help us out. Above everything else, our team is active on chat, I can see. So I guess we have a live discussion. But any kind of questions, please be there, be a bit patient, and I'm going to open up the floor for that. Thanks. Go ahead, AC.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to talk about, but I'll try not to take up too much time. And I want to start off with a little bit of context for anyone here who's not familiar with Myanmar. It's important to know that it's an extremely diverse country. We have like 135 ethnic groups categorized into 8 main races. And since before the coup, these groups have been at war with the military. And it's been like 6 decades or so. And that the dominant ethnic group, which is the Buddhist Burma majority, mainly living, in centralish heartland of Myanmar, have largely ignored the oppression of these ethnic groups, and that these ethnic groups have also, with the help of some neighbors, the obvious one being China, raised their own armies to defend themselves, their people, their resources. So against this backdrop, I guess one of the most obvious challenges for the transition process post-revolution, or even in order to win the revolution, is bringing together all these ethnic groups. And you can see more, ethnic and gender diversity in the makeup of the current government in exile, our legitimate government, the National Unity Government, that's representing the civilian government that was ousted by the coup. And they've really communicated their commitment to, building a federal democratic union that's truly inclusive. They've developed a charter to that end. So they're really trying to pull in more ethnic voices. But the issue still remains that ethnic groups have a lot of distrust and questions around whether a Burma-led opposition can really be trusted to deliver on their promises after victory, which so far the track record has not been great, unfortunately. And now, in addition to all these, ethnic groups and the challenge of bringing them together, there are also a lot of new groups and social movements and new leaders that have popped up since the revolution. And that also includes a lot of pro-democracy militias, such as the Different People's Defense Forces, and not all of them are firmly, under the control of the NUG or fully aligned with the NUG. It's clear who the radical opposition is. Certain activists, the NUG and its affiliated bodies, people who have taken part in the CDM movement, for example. But it's not always clear where these militias or the ethnic revolutionary organizations stand. Some are more moderate. They're looking to kind of protect their interests and are a bit like taking a wait and see strategy, while some are, like the border guard forces, are openly siding with the regime because of economic interests. And these groups also have had squabbles within groups as well as with other groups. And the military is really trying hard, using both the stick and the carrot methods to make sure, that they can maintain peace so that their forces aren't spread too thin with conflicts on all fronts. And the NUG is also, as I mentioned, trying to, to their credit, already pull everyone together and build the alliances that we need for the transition. And, there's also other stakeholders involved, like business people, like wealthy cronies who will want to protect their profits and businesses, and religious leaders who will want to have a strong influence. But basically the point is that there's a lot of different stakeholders with a lot of different interests, some of whom are armed, all of whom are going to want a say to ensure that their interests are represented. So it's moving forward, it's really critical that, in the transition process, all these emerging leaders are able to build trust and set agendas that kind of reflect, everyone's interests and needs, will bring about meaningful change and bring groups together to work toward like a common vision of tomorrow that everyone can be invested in. And I think that a couple other points that Bella mentioned, which is also kind of important for Myanmar, is, not only using tactics of resistance but also thinking a lot more about negotiation and building coalitions across these groups. So especially for maybe smaller social movements and groups, they'll need to kind of, build alliances with larger groups to ensure that they're represented. And if, we can't negotiate with each other and build the coalitions needed, we risk continuing our tradition of protracted civil war, especially with the number of armed groups there now. And it's also, I think, important to keep an eye on on our international actors and allies that can help us, whether it's building up our human resources, guiding transition bodies, or providing technical and financial assistance. So it's really important for activists and leaders to kind of develop these skill sets and build these relationships so that they can, implement and establish the structural reforms that will be needed for a peaceful transition. And then one other thing that might be helpful too in building trust is establishing strong monitoring and accountability activities and putting into place these institutional mechanisms or watchdog NGOs or other bodies so that we can hold people accountable. And one last thing I want to mention, speaking of negotiations, one challenge will be the maximalist stance that the pro-democracy actors currently have in regard to negotiating with the army. And you really can't blame people after you've seen how cruel and brutal they've been, how they've destroyed our country in the past. And also given that we've tried this power sharing hybrid governance thing and it has failed. But at the same time, it's really difficult to imagine how we can, completely get rid of the largest and most developed institution in the nation. So yes, we understand that there's this, rightful desire for justice, but also the people have to come to terms with the fact that maybe some parts of the army may need to be incorporated into the transition process in a way that may prevent them from taking back power, but also being aware of the risk of creating a power vacuum, especially with so many armed groups on the rise. So I guess what I want to say is that just moving forward, they need to pivot from the mindset of revolution and resistance to that of reform and rebuilding, and then really going down this, developing this roadmap and strategy for transition, keeping an eye on how transition is unfolding in other nations as well, noting down lessons, standing in solidarity, which I'm sure the generals are also noting down the lessons right now. And just be prepared that it's going to be a long-term project. We have to take it step by step to really consolidate the democracy. And in the meantime, build trust, build the right alliances and coalitions, and try to pull in more people that are supporting the regime rather than, just eliminating everything, and working closely to develop the civil society organizations that will help us during the transition process so that we can achieve a sustainable democracy and it can begin to mature.
Thank you, AC, very much. I very much agree with you about maximalist expectations and the aims of those pro-democratic acts. And I think Bella actually does mention that in her report. By the way, many people actually, Bella, have asked me about whether they can actually get more insights, and I think we'll instruct them where and how to. I want to say, maybe, don't be surprised. I think that at some point, maybe we're going to be talking about even publishing some more extensive piece on that at a certain point. But before we move on, AC, just one thing, there is a lot of discussion going on within the community about post-transitional challenges and issues, that pro-democracy movements are facing, that they're losing solidarity from the amount of the solidarity they have before the change, and after it's not the same, therefore it's declining. And so that's a myth. So that's one question. I mean, do you feel that international solidarity for internal struggle to diminish the influence of the military, was missing, and missing, by a lot, in a way that it was some way, contributing by a lot what was going on afterwards. And then the second question is, I bet it's a bit tricky question for the Myanmar, but how much is this Rohingya, like Rohingya problem and the case and everything that happened around it, how much that kind of image, contributed towards the more decisive, idea of the military to commit a coup? Was that kind of international discussion about it, even some, like accusations going towards the pro-democratic forces about it, for what's going on? Was that diminishing, the potential for the democratic forces to maintain the course? So just briefly, please.
So I think to your first question, I think that you do see kind of fissures occurring. You see kind of some people, I think it's natural as these conflicts go on longer, and especially if you're talking about the, I think you're talking about like the diaspora community. Is that what you were referring to? Yeah, I think there is some burnout. It's difficult when you're far away, but I think that generally speaking, there is a lot of support, and you can see it from I think the financial support that continues to pour in to support the NUG and its resistance activities and a lot of resistance movements. And so there's less, but I think that there's enough to keep us going. And I think there's enough for us to win. And I guess I have to believe in that.
Okay. Just before you continue on the first one, because I think we have a question from the group that actually connects well to that. So it's like, of course, not ethnic groups within the Burma are having the same vision of future. So do some of them having and wanting to be independent mini states? I mean, how much that affected to the overall general strategy and the, joint vision of the future for the whole country? How big threat and how big cause and damage that made?
Yeah. I don't think that, I am by no means an expert on these ethnic revolutionary organizations and these ethnic groups, but I understand that there are some of the ethnic groups, like, for example, in Chin, right? They want to just be included. They want it to be fair. They want to maybe have some autonomy to rule their own state, but they don't necessarily want to succeed and break away from Myanmar. And I think that, but there might be some groups that really do want autonomy. So they have a common enemy right now, most of them. And once again, it's a very complicated situation. So even when I say, the Chin people want to stay part of the country, there's like a lot of different forces and groups within Chin. So I'm not even sure that it accurately represents, what that state or region wants. But I think that the one thing that's holding everyone together is that the common enemy of the Myanmar military. I think they're tired of, the gross violation of human rights. They want to protect their people. They want to protect their resources. And I think that that will be the key to kind of bringing all of them together, this common enemy, and being promised and hopefully, seeing that the NUG or whichever opposition leader comes up, that they are prepared to deliver on these promises. I don't know if that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
But do you still want me to cover the Rohingya one, or?
Yeah, please go.
Yeah, I think that it didn't help that because of the stance that Daw Aung San Suu Kyi took on the genocide that was obviously happening. I think that it did really weaken ties with Western states and people that could have been strong allies, and kind of maybe deterred the military somewhat. Although I kind of doubt that these idiot senior generals really care, but I think it would have been a deterrence, and I think that really did impact us in a way. And I think that, one failure of the NLD government was that they really didn't do well on the peace talks and the negotiations. They failed to bring all these ethnic groups together. I think that that would have been a strong deterrent, that the country stood united against the military, and that would have been a protection that we would have had. Yeah.
You know, this is actually great to the point of one of the Bella's findings, you know, and one of the research findings, which was the capacity for the society to extensively use the skills of horizontal negotiation, meaning the finding ways to interconnect. Now, there is a great question from Caroline that actually follows up on that, and it was directly to Bella, which is like, what does transitional justice look like in practice, Bella? And is there any case study where failure to balance holding offenders accountable with not becoming vindictive played a decisive role in disintegration of democracy? I mean, Myanmar is a good case, but any other ideas?
Yeah, that's a great question, Caroline. I'm really glad that you raised it. So transitional justice is quite a complex kind of topic, if you will. And I think particularly in a democratic transition process, right? But we can look at it in a couple of different ways. And to be honest with you, we're pulling it from the peace building reconciliation kind of world, right? The reason that we're doing that is because a thriving democracy is built on interdependence. That means that I disagree with my neighbor, but we're still willing to shop at each other's kind of businesses. We're still willing to say hi to each other and carry on with our days, even if we disagree on some political topics. And we're willing to negotiate to find a middle ground. So in order to really achieve that, there's a few different ways of transitional justice that can take place. At the high level, we want to look towards criminal justice, either through local, regional, or even international courts. This is particularly important for victims and helping them to heal, helping the country to kind of heal and move forward. There's other kinds of forms that can take place. It might look like reparations from the government. It might also look like things that are a little bit less criminal justice in nature. So, peace forums, truth forums, building monuments towards those that were killed during the revolution. These are all really important pieces that we can put down. Now, further to your question, we have seen in a number of different transitions a extensive effort to lead some kind of form of criminal justice that has resulted in significant backsliding, and in the worst case scenario has resulted in civil war. So the two examples that are really coming to mind for me, a key one is Iran. We saw that after the 1979 revolution that, the new kind of government went through and essentially purged the entire military and the entire army, the entire government. And while we can't say that the aims of those that co-opted that revolution were entirely democratic, it certainly didn't help to go through and to purge the entire government. It really set the stage for an autocratic kind of approach to governing. Another example that we can think of where I think really aggressive transitional justice and has had some positive effects, but also has been detrimental to personal freedoms is Rwanda. There were some really successful cases of criminal justice taking place through hybrid tribal and international courts, as well as a lot of kind of truth seeking around the genocide that took place there. But at the same time, we found that that has turned into an autocratic level of silencing and a change towards the entire kind of focus around democratic consolidation. So there's absolutely a risk if we push too far on transitional justice, but it is important for us to pursue it as a means to build trust and to seek, reconciliation for victims.
Thank you, Bella, for that. There was a good question from John coming to you, but I think it's really relevant to Egypt and Ahmed as well. I'm going to ask. I'm therefore directed to you, Ahmed. Like is a situation where activists massively joining politics after the change, does this lead to division, even and break off individual interests and even more, break off the joint vision of tomorrow? How does that affect the transition? Your opinion on that from what you have seen.
I know activists who refuse to formulate, and I'm sure Slow know them personally also, who refuse to, after the revolution, to formulate political parties and to start to be more professionally politicians. And most of them ended in jail now because they didn't. Activists is the dreamers of tomorrow, and they usually have captured a picture of the society they wanted to implement. In societies have a lot of refusal against change by nature. Some of it because of ideology, some of it because of different religions, some of it because of there is a minority problem, some of it because of there is the age, the demographic problems. You have a huge number of older generation who really are quite fine with the status quo, and basically being a dreamer cannot be continued. You need to formulate these dreams into a political agenda and to an organization who can really capitalized actually, who really capitalized the success of the revolution. Otherwise, you are continue to be a dreamer, which is not bad, but it's actually also not implementing any of your dreams. Sometimes some of the activists, because the dreams is so big and bam, it's happening, they couldn't cross the state of mind to be, okay, we are a hippie youngster in the streets, now we need to be professionals and we need to talk professionally. Some of them couldn't pass this stage, and they still think that the revolution is a button you push and then it's happening every day. It's not like this. Canvas is one of the organizations in the world, maybe the only organization in the world, Canvas and maybe the International Conflict for Non-Violence, International Center for Non-Violence Conflict, is the two organizations in the world who can tell you making a revolution is not an easy thing. It's a lot of things in the same time. Part of it, it's the feeling of the masses of the needs of the change, and this is you cannot build this because you are a good campaigner or you have enough advertisement. You build this because the government is doing a very bad job. As simple as this. You are capturing and capitalizing on the failure of the others. So there is always others will capture and capitalize on your failures. And revolutionists, most of them are newcomers to the power. They don't know who is who and what is what. They just have this beautiful dreams of making great change. And because of the revolutions, it's a big action in your life. I know people still think this 18 days in Tahrir Square was the best 18 days in their life. While for other people, other friends, same age, think that this 18 days was the most insignificant days in their life because there was no government.
Ahmed,
as simple as this, there was no government.
I have a quick on that. So just short one. So, Morsi's government and Morsi being ousted. How would Egypt, just in one sentence, look now if Morsi would have been, changed in the democratic process of the elections instead of being ousted? Do you feel that things would be very different now?
Yes, definitely. I think basically if we changed Morsi democratically, that would be much better. But the problem that after Morsi been ousted, or actually stripped the power through a coup d'etat, military coup d'etat specifically, and to be very direct with terminology here, the military, in order to convince the revolution the leftist and the liberal revolutionist groups, they had to bring a constitution. The Egyptian constitution today is one of the best constitutions Egypt ever seen. Very liberal, very open-minded. You cannot imagine everything you wanted to structure in the revolution is written in that document. But this is the most undemocratic dictatorship, military dictatorship government Egypt ever seen also. So we have the document, the dreams is captured in a written text, and the government say fuck to the constitution and they do whatever they want. So very, very awkward situation, but it's very real also. So if we get Morsi out of power by election boxes, this could be a much better resolution than giving everything to the military till the point that the military expanding their own economical capacity to have 60% of the Egyptian economy. And if you don't know, the Egyptian economy is the economy of 100 million people. It's a big market there.
Thank you for that. Thanks. And I think the last one was really important. And that's what I wanted to hear for a long time from someone who's, who has a huge authority in being activist from Egypt. So, but there is there's so many questions. I don't think we're going to be able to answer all of those. But one of those, which I think is very generic, Bella, is like, what binds a diverse social groups together against the anti-democratic behavior after the change? How, just short, please, short. Couple of hints.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, I think that the reality is that division post-victory is inevitable. No one's going to be on the same page in the transition. We all have individual interests and goals. And what that means is that we need to continue to pursue horizontal negotiations. We need to find areas of our own demands that we're willing to concede on so that we are able to build a successful coalition. So in short, it's continue to negotiate and move away from being maximalist in your stance.
Thank you so much. There are so many questions, guys, that came in. Unfortunately, this time is too short. I'm not sure that we can answer all of those. And I would not like to keep you so much, into the time that actually we are about to breach. So with all of that, I want to thank you all participating. Thank you, AC, so much. Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you, Bella. It's been really fascinating discussion. I think 1 hour, it's way too short to discuss it. And I think it's being, one of the things that probably we as a Canvas and the Canvas team will be, thinking about how to, keep up this discussion and how to keep all of you guys incorporated and part of it. Now, we have a huge attendance today. We have, over, close to 200 people being with us. I think over 500 registered. Thanks, Anna, who's been here with me. Thanks to the whole team who's been actually making this able to happen. And I hope that we're going to continue on this note. I'm going to just thank you all participating and stay tuned. Thursday, June 27th, we'll be talking about rebellious women. We'll be talking about how the women captured the world's attention, becoming the face of a continued fight for the human rights. We'll actually have, interesting. Let me try to get back. Yeah, we'll try to, answer some new questions and, enjoy the Canvas Summer Academy. Try to get as much as you can, guys. And thank you all for being here. Thanks and good luck.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bella, Ahmed, AC.
Thank you. Bye-bye.